I never thought my life would change so drastically on what seemed like an ordinary Sunday. That day, as always, I was at church, sitting in my favorite pew, right in the center of the sanctuary, where the choir music echoed as if heaven were descending to earth. The morning sermon focused on the tithe, a topic I had heard countless times and knew almost by heart. "Give your 10% to God," the pastor proclaimed passionately, citing Malachi 3 verse 10. His words, though familiar, stirred within me a mix of guilt and obligation, just as they always did. I had consistently honored my tithe, even when it jeopardized my financial stability, believing that this offering was my guarantee of God's blessings. I always saw myself as a good person. I regularly attended church, actively engaged in community events, and made an effort to treat others with kindness. Yet, if I were to be honest with myself, my relationship with God often felt mechanical, almost as if I were ticking off items on a religious checklist. Of all these practices, the tithe was my greatest source of pride. I gave that 10% with the firm belief that it ensured my place in heaven. However, one day, something happened that shattered everything I thought I understood about life, death, and most importantly, God. Before we go further, I invite you to reflect with me as I share this story. If you've ever felt that your connection with the divine is more of a routine than a genuine bond, this video might be just the message you need. Listen, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who could also benefit from hearing this truth. And here is a question for you. Have you ever wondered if your faith is based on genuine love or simple obligation? Leave me your answer in the comments. Now, let's begin. It was a regular afternoon, just like any other. I was on my way home after running some errands when everything changed in an instant. A truck ran a red light and collided with my car with immense force. I barely had time to hear the screeching tires and the sound of the glass shattering before everything went dark, as if the world had simply switched off. When I finally opened my eyes again, I was no longer in my car. I found myself standing in what seemed like an infinite expanse of living light. It wasn't just light to be seen, it was something you could deeply feel. It surrounded me like a warm, comforting embrace, yet at the same time, I felt utterly vulnerable, as if every part of my soul, every thought and hidden secret, was completely exposed to that presence. Then, I saw him. Jesus. I don't need to say who he was. I knew instantly, with a certainty that I can't describe. His presence was overwhelming, a torrent of pure love and absolute authority that transcended anything I'd ever experienced before. Without thinking, my knees gave way, and I fell prostrate in front of him, trembling. I wanted to speak, justify myself, explain so many things, but the words got stuck in my throat, unable to come out. Jesus looked at me, and his gaze pierced every layer of my being. It wasn't a look of condemnation, but it was penetrating, as if he knew every corner of my heart. In his eyes, I felt something disconcerting, an infinite love, but also a deep confrontation. I felt immensely loved and, ironically, at the same time, deeply unworthy. "Do you know why you are here?" He asked me in a voice that was at once soft as a whisper, yet powerful as a command. His tone was like a melody, filled with meaning. But I couldn't reply. No, I had no idea what to say. "Let me show you," he said. In the blink of an eye, my entire life unfolded before me like a vivid film, full of details I had long forgotten. Every moment, every choice, every thought was laid bare. I saw the times I had shown kindness, but also the countless occasions when I had ignored someone in need simply because it was easier. I witnessed my pride in actions I had believed to be acts of service, not because they honored God, but because they made me feel superior to others. Even my tithe, something I had always taken great pride in, was revealed as nothing more than a hollow ritual, done more out of duty than out of love. "Our faith, you've misunderstood," Jesus said, his tone firm but devoid of condemnation. "Tithing is not about money. It's about trust. It's about the state of your heart." His words tore at me. Tears began to stream down my face as the weight of my disconnection from him became painfully clear. I had been far from really knowing him, much more than I'd ever imagined. I have given you so much, Jesus continued, full of truth. But you've held back. Now, I'll show you what you've been missing. Before I could even formulate a question or express my confusion, the light around me changed, enveloping me and taking me into an experience that would alter my life forever. Suddenly, I found myself in a place of indescribable beauty, something beyond anything I could have imagined on earth. The sky was filled with colors so vivid and unfamiliar, they appeared almost alive. The air itself seemed to hum with a melody, not coming from any one source but resonating from everywhere at once. It felt as if the very wind were offering praise. I saw people there, their faces glowing with a joy that seemed to radiate from their very souls. A peace so pure that it could not be feigned. They were worshipping together, united in perfect harmony. There was no trace of pain or sorrow, nothing but a profound sense of belonging and love. Every part of my being yearned to stay there forever, to be a part of that eternal, heavenly worship. However, even as I stood there, I felt a gentle tug, a reminder that it was not my time yet. Jesus appeared beside me again, his expression filled with tenderness. "This is what I wish for all my children," his voice said, full of love. "But not all understand what living means to me. They cling to rituals and rules, but their hearts are far from me." As I spoke, I caught glimpses of what I knew from earth. Some of the people I saw were true, devoted servants, their lives defined by selfless love and genuine humility that reflected the very heart of God. Yet, I also saw others like me, those who focused on outward appearances, performing rituals and visible duties while neglecting the deeper calling to surrender their hearts fully to God. Seeing myself in that second group was a painful realization, but the truth was undeniable. The words of Jesus echoed powerfully in my spirit with a clarity I could not ignore. It is not about what you give, but how you live. True worship is a life given in love and obedience. I felt those words break through every defense I had built around my heart, revealing just how far I had strayed from truly understanding what living meant to him. Before I could even begin to respond, the scene shifted once more. This time, I was transported to a completely different place, an environment that felt devoid of hope. The bright light and joy of heaven I had previously experienced were gone, replaced by a heavy darkness that seemed to consume everything in its path. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, filled with an indescribable sense of emptiness. All around me, I could hear the agonizing screams and wails of despair, each one filled with regret so deep it tore at the soul. Shadowy figures moved in the distance, trapped in suffering that seemed endless. The atmosphere was thick with the tangible weight of selfishness, pride, and unrepentance. "This is what it means to live apart from me," Jesus said, his voice carrying a sorrow that seemed to reflect all of humanity's pain. "When you cling to your heart, when you live only for yourself, this is the fruit of that life." I wanted to look away, to escape the overwhelming anguish of what I was witnessing, but Jesus kept me locked in his gaze. It was as if he was ensuring I fully understood. What he was showing me wasn't a punishment, but an effort to awaken my conscience to the consequences of my choices. "It is impossible to serve two masters," Jesus said with an authority that pierced me. "You must choose." As he spoke, I felt the weight of my selfishness like never before. My jumbled priorities, my pride, and my constant need to maintain control were revealed as the barriers that had kept me from fully surrendering to him. It was clear that my faith had been lukewarm and indifferent and that I did not understand the true cost of full surrender. However, in the midst of that painful revelation, I heard the words that ignited a spark of hope. "But there is hope," Jesus said, his voice breaking through the darkness like a bolt of lightning in a storm. "I have given you another chance." With those words, I was engulfed once again by the radiant light, and the oppression of darkness disappeared. Jesus was standing in front of me, his hand extended toward me like a divine invitation. "I am giving you a choice," he continued. "You can return to your life and live it for me, or you can continue as you were and lose the fullness of what I have prepared for you." The weight of his offer was indescribable. I knew I did not deserve that second chance, but his love for me was so obvious, so overwhelming, that I fell to my knees once more, with tears streaming down my face. "Lord, I choose you," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I don't want to live for myself anymore. Teach me how to live for you." Jesus smiled, and in his expression, one could see a perfect blend of joy and compassion. "Go, tell others what you have seen," he said in a tone full of purpose. "Help them understand. I wish that it was their hearts, not their rituals, that reflected true worship, a life fully spent in love." With those words, the light that surrounded me intensified, and suddenly, I felt like I was being drawn back into my body, as if by a gentle but firm force pulling me back to earthly reality. I opened my eyes in a hospital bed. My body was sore, but healthy. The doctors looked astonished, murmuring that my survival was a true miracle. But deep down, I knew the true miracle was not physical, but spiritual. Something deep and eternal had changed within my soul. Since that day, my life began to change in ways I never could have imagined. At first, I struggled to process what I had gone through and to find the right words to convey it. It felt like trying to describe something beyond comprehension. Everything I had seen, heard, and felt during that encounter with Jesus was so significant, so overwhelming, that putting it into words seemed nearly impossible. But I remembered his clear instruction, to share this message, no matter how challenging or uncomfortable it might be. Years have passed since that life-altering day, the day I died and returned, not only with a new perspective on the tithe but with a completely transformed understanding of faith and life itself. At that time, I couldn't fully grasp the magnitude of the lessons that had been revealed to me. It was as if the impact of that encounter was so deep that it would take years for me to fully comprehend its most profound meanings. However, now, as I look back, I can clearly see how that moment transformed not only the way I give, but also how I live, breathe, and relate to the world. The years that followed were filled with challenges, growth, and moments of understanding. At first, I found myself struggling. How could I integrate what I had learned into my everyday life without completely disconnecting from the community and structures that had defined my faith up until then? I was part of a church where the tithe had always been treated as an obligation, a sacred duty that marked your level of righteousness before God. It was a system that everyone around me followed, convinced that abiding by that rule was enough to guarantee their blessings. But I could no longer operate under that same logic. I had seen the truth. The truth, as I had learned it, was not about money. It was not about a fee or a magic formula to unlock divine favors. The tenth, as Jesus showed me, was much deeper than that. It was not a simple transactional exchange with God. It was actually an expression of something infinitely more significant: the state of my heart and my willingness to fully trust Him. I began to delve deeper into the scriptures, looking for answers that might further what Jesus had shown me. The more I researched and prayed, the more the true essence of the message became clear. The tenth was not about what I could offer, but about my willingness to completely surrender. It was a symbolic act, a way to reflect my relationship with God based on total trust and genuine love. I spent long hours in prayer, asking for guidance and clarity as I carefully dismantled the belief system I had built around it. I tithed every time I drew closer to God. I sincerely felt the heavy layers of misunderstandings, guilt, and religious obligations begin to crumble, revealing something purer and more authentic. Jesus was not after my money. He was after my heart. His calling was not to give out of obligation, but to live a life of surrender, love, and absolute trust in Him. Tithing was such a deep-rooted part of my identity that I never realized how much weight I had carried on my shoulders. The pressure to live up to expectations, the fear of not measuring up, and the guilt that invaded me every time I felt I wasn't doing things perfectly had slowly consumed me. But Jesus, in his infinite patience and love, showed me something that changed everything. He wasn't looking for perfection from my tithes, nor did he expect me to meet some ideal standard. What he wanted was for me to come to him just as I was, with my faults, my pain, and my imperfections, fully trusting that he would provide everything I truly needed. That was the turning point, the point where everything began to change. When I stopped seeing tithing as an obligation, as something I had to check off on a spiritual to-do list, I experienced something I had never felt before: freedom. For the first time, I felt free to give, not out of fear of the consequences, but because I truly desired to. I wanted to honor God, not only with my money but with every aspect of my life, with my time, my thoughts, my words, my actions, and my love for others. Giving stopped being a duty and became an act of trust and love. The genuine transformation was not immediate or spectacular. It was gradual, like a seed that begins to germinate in silence. However, little by little, the way I related to my community, my church, and my family began to change. My way of giving took on a new meaning. I no longer set aside a specific percentage of my income because it was the right thing to do. Instead, I did so in an authentic way, moved by a transformed heart. I began to help people in need, to give to causes that truly resonated with me, and to support those within my community who were facing difficulties. I gave because I wanted to reflect the love and compassion that God had poured out on me. As my heart changed, something extraordinary was happening. The world around me also began to change. My eyes were opened to a new reality. I began to notice how the concept of tithing had been misrepresented in so many places. It had become an act of appearance, an empty tradition more focused on standards and outward perception than genuine generosity. It was evident that many people, like myself in the past, were trapped in a cycle of giving without understanding, acting without feeling, in a desperate attempt to please God through actions disconnected from a real and deep relationship with Him. One Sunday, while I was at church, I heard a sermon on tithing. The pastor was talking about the importance of giving and the blessings that would come from doing so. It was a message I had heard hundreds of times, but this time, something inside me stirred. I felt a burning urge to stand up and say out loud, "It's not about the money, it's about the heart. It's about genuine love." But I knew I couldn't do it. The congregation wasn't ready to hear the truth I had discovered, a truth that would have shaken their foundations. It was too soon, too disruptive. Instead of standing up, I sat there silently, reflecting on how much my life had changed. I realized I could no longer give in the same way I had been taught. But I also understood that not everyone was ready to embrace the truth that I had found. It was a painful realization, a reminder that not everyone is in the same place on their spiritual journey. It wasn't easy feeling like a stranger in a place that had been my home for so long. But I knew that my journey was unique and not meant to be the same as everyone else's. God didn't reveal this truth to me just for me. I understood, over time, that there was a larger purpose, something that went beyond my own transformation. That truth was meant to be shared with others. At first, it was hard for me to find the courage to talk about it. And when I finally did, I started with the people I trusted the most. The initial reaction was skeptical. People seemed resistant. They were wary of what I was saying, and I didn't blame them, because I had been there myself. I, too, had believed for years that tithing was a transaction, a formula for earning God's favor. I had lived by that belief, convinced that I was doing the right thing. However, after what I experienced, I could no longer remain silent. I had seen with my own eyes the flaws in that way of thinking. Slowly, with patience, I began to share my story, and little by little, I saw how people began to listen. At first, it was just a few close friends, but as I continued to share what I had learned, something incredible began to happen. Hearts began to be transformed. They understood that the truth was not in the amount of money they gave, but in the disposition of their hearts towards God. They began to understand that giving should not arise from fear or obligation, but from love. And when they accepted this truth, something profound changed in them. It was not just a financial change, it was a spiritual awakening. I saw how these people began to give with genuine joy, not with reluctance. I saw how their faces reflected peace, knowing that their generosity was not just an external action, but a sincere expression of their hearts towards God. For the first time, I understood what Jesus meant when he spoke of the kingdom of God as something that resides in the heart. It was not about living up to external appearances, but about experiencing a deep internal transformation that gave meaning to every act of giving. Over time, I dared to speak to larger groups. I shared my experience of having known Jesus and the truths that he had shown me. Some people listened with open hearts, while others dismissed my words. But that didn't stop me. I knew I had to keep speaking the truth, even though it wasn't popular, even though it wasn't always easy. One day, I was invited to speak at a church event. The topic was generosity, and I knew this was my chance to share what I had learned about tithing. I was nervous. I felt a mix of fear and uncertainty about how people would react to what I was going to say. But as I stood up to speak, something shifted inside me. A peace that surpassed all understanding filled my heart and cleared my doubts. I began to speak from the depths of my soul about the true meaning of giving. I explained to them that tithing was not simply a financial transaction, but a reflection of love for God and for others. As I spoke, I could see understanding light up on people's faces. It was as if they suddenly began to connect the dots, to understand that giving was not a way of negotiating with God, but an expression of a life of generosity that reflected his grace and love. I told them how Jesus showed me that tithing was not limited to money. It was something much broader. It was to give our time, our attention, our actions, and our love towards others, towards the world, and above all, towards God. When I finished speaking, many people approached me. Their words were full of gratitude, and I could see how this new understanding had planted seeds in their hearts. It was as if, at that moment, something in them too had changed, just as it had happened to me. Looking back, I can see how much I have changed since that moment. The truth is that, although the road has not been easy, it is not over either. However, I am no longer the same person I was before. When I give, I do not do it out of obligation or fear, but because my heart has been transformed by the love of God. That transformation has allowed me to understand what Jesus wanted to tell me in that meeting years ago. The tithe is not just about numbers or percentages. It is much deeper than that. It is an act of total surrender to God, not based on a religious obligation, but on a genuine love. When we give from the heart, we are reflecting the love of Christ in our lives. And that, dear friends, is the truest worship we can offer. This is the kind of love that sets free. And the truth has set me free. If this message touched your heart, I invite you to take a step of faith today. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this transformative truth. Write in the comments, "My heart is for God," as a public commitment to live in his love and generosity. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications to receive more content that strengthens your faith and transforms your perspective. Together, we can reflect the love of God and walk in his truth. If you watched the entire video, please comment, "Full view."